If you've only seen the first part, you haven't seen the best part. In Superman 2.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today here on the channel we're going to be talking about Superman 2 and Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut, and their new 4K Blu-rays that just came out courtesy of Warner Brothers. But before we dive into that, if you are a fan of 4K Blu-ray reviews, movie reviews, a little bit of tech and game reviews, and now we do podcasts, if you are a fan of all that, then this is the channel for you, and nothing helps this channel out more than by you simply liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Superman 2 was originally released in 1980. It was originally directed by Richard Donner before moving off of him, and then the official director is Richard Lester. And it again stars Margot Kidder, Christopher Reeve as Kal-El and Superman, Gene Hackman as the devilish Lex Luthor, a little bit of Ned Beatty in this one, and plenty of other actors that pop up throughout the rest of this film. And this movie is probably most famous for the director's switch that happened about 75% through the shoot of the original Superman 2. So originally the plan was to shoot Superman 1 and 2 back to back, Richard Donner directing both of them, but they kind of reached an impasse where they couldn't agree on the creative direction and money and all of that, so they kind of agreed to go their separate ways is the nicest way to put it. The bad way to put it is they fired Richard Donner and replaced him with his friend who was working with him as the second unit director, Richard Lester, who was a big-time director himself. So they decided to replace him and have Richard Lester finish the rest of the film. The only thing was the film was shot pretty much to completion. It only needed about 25% more to be filmed, and a lot of the actors didn't want to come back if Richard Donner wasn't going to be involved. Most famously, Gene Hackman didn't come back, and Marlon Brando actually was suing the studio because he didn't feel like he was receiving his percentage of the profits of the original Superman movie. So they decided, okay, we're going to let Richard Donner go, and we are going to cut Marlon Brando out of the sequel completely, pay him his money, which I think resulted in about $15 million for him, and they didn't want to pay him any of the profits for Superman 2, so they just got him out of there. He's not in the sequel, even though all his stuff was already shot. Gene Hackman had all of his stuff already shot, but they did have to bring back Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve for reshoots. So actually, if you watch Superman 2, you could see a little bit of some continuity errors because there had been so much time that passed between them originally shooting, which was between 1977 and 1980, and then they had to bring them back in 1979 and early 1980 to get the film ready for release in 1980. This was a big-time studio hit. Yet again, it was on a budget of, I believe, $54 million, and it made $155 million at the box office. About half of what the first one made, so I guess we didn't get a lot of returning audiences, which is weird, because I think that this movie, at least the Richard Donner cut, is probably the best Superman film ever released. Now, there are some big differences between the original Superman 2 and the Superman 2 Richard Donner cut. They tried to make the second Superman feel a little bit different. They tried to go a little bit more cheesier and a little bit more comedy-based with Richard Lester's vision of the film, because Richard Donner's original vision of the film, he kind of was like, the way Richard Lester actually describes it is like very much like David Lean, like, you know, he wanted to make this big epic film, whereas Richard Lester is not used to that. He wants his films to be a little bit more smaller, a little bit more quirky, whereas Richard Donner wanted to make more of an epic. And I think that epic feel that he was going for, I think works out better in the Richard Donner cut than it does in the original cut of Superman 2. There's also some other really big differences. First of all, the prologue happens before the opening credits of Superman 2, and the Superman 2 credits for Richard Donner's cut are basically the same credits as the first one, whereas in Richard Lester's, the credits are intertwined with the prologue. And then the opening scenes are completely different, and I actually prefer the Richard Donner cut opening scene where they're at the Daily Planet and Margot Kidder's Lois Lane decides to throw herself out the window to prove that that's Superman. I know Clark Kent's Superman, which Clark should have just said it. She wouldn't have thrown herself out the window, and she wouldn't have tried to shoot him with a blank. I have a lot of questions in the sense that in both movies, she does try and kill herself to prove that Superman is Superman. And I just have questions about everybody else surrounding Lois Lane. How have you not intervened on her and been like, I think you're losing it here. No one else thinks that's Superman. Even if she's right, the fact that she tried to do that and nobody put her in an institution really says a lot about the rest of the people working at the Daily Planet or at Niagara Falls, depending on which cut of the film you are watching. And I just think that the stakes in this movie are a little bit higher. You get General Zod back. We saw him in the first one with him and his minions, but we didn't get to actually see what he was going to do. So this movie, he finally comes back to Earth. He escapes the flying rectangle that him and his buddies were trapped in. They come to Earth, and they're here to take over, and everybody realizes pretty damn quick, not only do these guys have the same powers as Superman, but take Superman, and if he was bad, that's what all three of these guys are doing. They're out here just destroying everything, and the army still hasn't figured out yet that there is absolutely no way to stop them. They take over the White House, they make the president kneel before them, and at this time, Superman is having conflict. He doesn't want to be Superman no more. He is smitten with love. He didn't expect this at all. Like he tells his father in the Richard Donner cut, they cut Marlon Brando out completely and they replaced him with Superman's mom. So we get to see her tell Superman about General Zod instead of Marlon Brando. But I think Marlon Brando adds so much more to Superman 2. Actually, I think he adds more than he does in the original Superman, because they cut out all those sequences with Christopher Reeves and Marlon Brando talking, and those father-son moments. And I think those are some of the best scenes in the Superman 2 Richard Donner cut. I really enjoyed those scenes. Also, you get Gene Hackman seeing Marlon Brando also. And I think it just works better with Marlon Brando. It's unfortunate that they were forced to cut those scenes, because I do think that those scenes really help to show the confliction in Christopher Reeve or Kal-El or Clark Kent, whatever you want to call him. And then those scenes where he does lose his powers and he gets his ass kicked at the diner, I love that they paid that off at the very end of both of these movies. I just think that's awesome. I'm just glad that guy finally got his comeuppance at the very end of the movie, because, he didn't realize who he was fucking with, and it ended up coming back to bite him in the ass, and I thought that was just absolutely hysterical. But that's that summer blockbuster stuff that I think they were going for, and all that does still work in this movie. But the Richard Donner cut, I think, adds a lot more drama and pushes back a little bit against the summer blockbuster stuff that you would be used to. Even though this movie didn't come out in the summer, it still does feel like a summer blockbuster in the sense that, it's this big film, especially back in 1980, seeing Superman on the screen again. Yes, I know the special effects haven't aged very well, but that doesn't matter. You got to take yourself out of that and go back to 1980 and just imagine seeing all of this on the big screen back then, seeing the White House get destroyed. I mean, all that must have just been shocking back then to the general public. There were darker movies from the 70s, but not everybody saw those movies. This movie kids were going to, and it just must have been incredible to see on the big screen back then. But I wanted to also point out, because I didn't bring him up in the first one, but Ned Beatty is hysterical in these movies. Now, he doesn't get to play a big part in this movie because he gets left in jail, but man, every time he's on screen, it just blows my mind that that's Ned Beatty. That guy had some freaking range. He really did. He is an underrated actor. I know people rate him pretty high, but the range that this guy had is very, very underrated. And again, Gene Hackman turns in an incredible comedic performance in this movie. He's playing this over-the-top supervillain who just loves to be a supervillain and loves other supervillains. I love that that's what they go for. This is much more cheesier than what we get nowadays, but I really think it still works. I do think that the Richard Donner cut of this movie is the better cut of the two films, but I still think that both cuts of the film are pretty good. And in my opinion, I think they're both actually better than the original Superman. Not to say that the original Superman isn't a classic by its own rights, but if I'm going by my pure enjoyment of these films, I think that the Richard Donner cut is the superior version of Superman 2. And so far, going through my rewatch, I think right now, that is my favorite of the films. Is it better than Man of Steel yet? That's a little too close to call right now. I gotta admit, I had a shit-eating grin on my face the entire time I was watching this last night, so it's too hard to tell, but right now, it's very neck and neck between the Richard Donner cut and Man of Steel. Either way, I really do think you should check out Superman 2. Any cut that you want to watch, I think you'll definitely get some enjoyment out of it. If you're not a fan of Superman, I still think you'll enjoy them. But now it's time for us to talk about these 4K Blu-rays that just came out. So one thing I actually thought was really cool and I didn't expect, because based on the Rocky 4Ks that came out a couple months ago, they put the new Rocky vs. Drago cut and the original cut of Rocky 4 on one disc, and I thought that's what they were going to do with this, but no. Not only do you get the 4K and Blu-ray for both of these, both of the Blu-rays have extras for both the Richard Donner cut and for the original Superman 2. They both have making-of documentaries. Now, the making-of documentary on the regular Superman 2 Blu-ray is very similar to the making-of documentary, almost to the exact same length of about 52 minutes as the original Superman making-of documentary. But on the Richard Donner cut, you get like a 15-minute making of about how he recut the movie. Basically, he didn't recut the movie, he kind of just approved everything. He said it was just too hard for him to go back, because he has just such... Think about it, you're Richard Donner and you got fired off of Superman 2, you made the first one, it was a huge hit, but they didn't appreciate you. Yeah, I guess it would be hard to go back and look at something that you got fired off of, but he was into it. He said the memories were pouring back, so I thought that was pretty cool on there. You get deleted scenes on both, so really the fact that both discs, both those Blu-rays have extras, and these Blu-rays are packed in with the 4Ks, I thought was really awesome. Again, no new extras. This lines up, again, with regular Warner Brothers releases. All the extras are previously released on their previously released Blu-rays, so So no new extras on that 4K, and all the extras are the same that are on that Blu-ray, and those Blu-rays are the same previously released Blu-rays and scans. And now the 4Ks. Now these 4Ks are new scans, and they both have HDR10 and no Dolby Vision. Again, that lines up with Warner Brothers and their current releases. I sensed about last year they stopped using Dolby Vision, and I'm not too sure why, but they only use HDR10. And we get Dolby Atmos tracks on both of these. Now, I can't 100% say that's a Dolby Atmos track on the Richard Donner cut, because if you go into the menu, it just says English. You have no choices at all of any other options in there. That's it. You just hit English. Now, I checked it on 2 different systems, and it did pop up Dolby Atmos on both, and it sounded very similar to the Atmos track that is on the regular cut of Superman 2, so that leads me to believe that is. I'm just curious about what they would do if people don't have that set up. I guess it just downgrades it automatically, but yeah, I thought that was a little bit interesting. Warner Brothers has been doing this lately also, where their menu system is just very bare bones on these 4Ks. It just doesn't give you that much information, which is fine, but, you know, I just go to Blu-ray.com to check for this stuff, but I think it's, you know, not everybody is going to be willing to do that, and they want to see what's on the disc when you put the disc in. So it's a little bit of a minor complaint, but not a huge deal, and that's how it is on both of these cuts of the movie. So now comparing those Blu-rays to the 4Ks, again, HDR10, and unlike Superman the movie, I felt like overall both of these 4Ks were big jumps from the Blu-ray. Are they perfect cuts? No, obviously the Richard Donner cut has a little bit more issues because they were just, you know, they kind of chopped that together like Frankenstein's monster, but it does look a lot better than the previously released Blu-ray. Actually, I thought that was quite a jump from the Blu-ray to the 4K. There are still scenes in there that are super grainy, and as far as Superman 2, the original cut goes, if you put the Blu-ray in and the 4K back to back, you'll notice that the Blu-ray is actually less grainy in the opening scenes than it is on the 4K, which I thought was strange. You would think it's the other way around, but no, the actual Blu-ray looked better in those opening scenes. I would say that was the only scene in the movie where the Blu-ray looked better than the 4K. For the most part, the 4K looked much better than the Blu-ray. Right at the end, that big fight scene, you know, where the Statue of Liberty gets destroyed in the Donner cut and everything like that. Everything pops off the screen, like the Marbo truck. That really just, the red on the Marbo truck, that's where my eyes were getting focused on. I went back and compared them on the Blu-rays, and I was like, wow, okay, yeah. We get a resolution increase. The HDR is doing its job. I think it lined up a lot more with Warner Brothers releases that we get now, which is what I was expecting. I just had a feeling that they were going to forget about the original Superman movie. I was hoping we would get a new cut that looked similar to these, because these are definitely worth your money as far as 4Ks go. They definitely put a lot more effort into these ones than they did to the original one. The original one was from 2018, that scan, and these are current day scans, and these do both look a lot better than the original Superman the movie. But again, not perfect. They do still have some grainy scenes. They do seem to go scene to scene where, you know, it does look a little faded and the lighting looks a little bit off, and then the grain can just overwhelm certain scenes, but not like in the original one. The original one, you would get moments of good scenes, whereas this one you just get moments of bad scenes. So it's the reverse, and I think overall these are much, much improved over the original Superman 4K. So I'm very happy with that, and that makes me assume that Superman 3 and Superman 4 will also have really nice scans on there. And as far as those audio tracks go, they are really good. They both sound phenomenal. Again, you get John Williams back to do the score, so that score is just going to be kicking through your living room, and you're going to be wrapped up in this story. Again, John Williams knows how to make a score, so you get that epic feeling while you're watching this movie. The Superman theme is one of the greatest themes of all time. And overall, I'm just so happy with these discs. I was worried after watching Superman that I wasn't going to really enjoy these 2 discs. I was worried that they were all going to look like that, but my anticipation was that we would get a regular Warner Brothers 4K releases in here, and that the first one was just because they decided not to put a new scan on it, and thankfully that's exactly what happened. So if the rest of the set is like this, I think we're in good hands. So far, 3 out of the 5 discs in here. I'm very happy. I'm still a little disappointed, a little shell-shocked still that Superman didn't get as much love as these 2, but I'm very happy that the Richard Donner cut and the regular cut of Superman 2 are both really nice. If I was going to rate these out of 10, I would give both of these individually, not including the entire package, which we will review at the very, very end of this. Both of these I will give a really solid 8 out of 10. If these ever get individually released, I highly recommend grabbing them both. They are different films. They aren't the same. They still hit the same story beats, but they aren't the same film. They're cut together very different, right down to the credits being different. So I definitely recommend checking them both out. Me personally, I will always probably go back to the Richard Donner cut just because The tone of it definitely fits more into my style, and I think fits more into what a modern superhero audience would like, whereas the other one definitely feels like a product of 1980, which isn't a bad thing, it's just how it feels. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for being here on another episode of Let's Talk. I hope you're enjoying these Superman reviews. That's what we're going to be doing this week. So on Friday, we'll be reviewing Superman 3 on 4K, and on Saturday, we will have Superman 4, The Quest for Peace on 4K. And also on Saturday, if you're watching this, we will also be doing a live stream, our first here on the channel. So we hope you can join us here. That's going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern here on the channel. It's just going to be with me, and we're just going to be talking summer blockbusters, our favorites, and the rest coming out this year. So I hope you guys can join me on Saturday. And if you can't, no big deal. I completely understand. We just hope that you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and then while you're out there in those streets, tell all your friends about us. We'll be seeing you around.